this one open. I think this is the one that he's got going to her and everything, so.
at this time welcome Pastor Katina Martin and invite you to come forward, ma'am, to the podium. And Pastor Martin, I would invite you to tell us about your church and to then lead us in prayer.
Thank you.
When Pastor Martin is ready to lead us in prayer, I invite all who so desire to stand for the prayer and to remain standing to join the board in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you for the opportunity to have me share about Belmont Christian Church. We're celebrating 120 years this year. We are located in Southeast, and so we are surrounded by a lot of challenges that we are embracing. We're just loving on people and embracing God at the same time. So I'm the first African American and Black woman to serve as pastor of this church, and so we're embracing all of the beautiful change and all of the beautiful love that God is bringing our way. So thank you for the opportunity. Shall we pray together? Gracious and loving God, we come before you today with hearts full of gratitude, seeking your wisdom, seeking your guidance in this meeting today. We ask for your blessings upon the members of the Board of Supervisors and all who have gathered here today. Grant wisdom for decisions to be made that reflect justice, compassion, empathy, and integrity. May all listen with open hearts and minds, valuing each voice and perspective. Thank you for cooperation and unity, working together for the growth and common good for all residents of this country, of this county. And may your peace, protection, and cool breeze be upon all. We thank you for this opportunity to serve and for the responsibility that has been entrusted to each one of us. This is our prayer. We offer it in your name. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Pastor. Good afternoon. Welcome to our meeting for July 9th, 2024. Regular meetings are held on the second and fourth Tuesday at 3 p.m. Public hearings are held at 7 p.m. on the fourth Tuesday of each month. Deviations from this schedule will be announced. The meetings are broadcast live on RVTV Channel 3 and will be rebroadcast Thursday at 7 p.m. and on Sunday from 10 a.m. till 5 p.m. Board of Supervisors meetings can also be viewed online through Roanoke County website at www.roanokecountyva.gov. Individuals who require assistance or special arrangements to participate in or attend Board of Supervisors meetings should contact the clerk of the board at 540-772-2005 at least 48 hours in advance. Please turn all cell phones off or place them on silent. Item A, opening ceremonies. Number 1, remote participation approval. I was notified in writing by Supervisor Shepherd that she would be unable to physically attend this meeting because she is out of the Commonwealth spending time with family in North Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. She requested to participate in today's meeting by telephone. Pursuant to the board's policy for participation in meetings through electronic communication, which was adopted by this board on September the 28th, 2022, I notified her that her request complied with the board's policy and was approved. Her request and my determination, along with a copy of the policy, were thereafter shared with you supervisors by email. At this time, I invite Ms. Shepherd to again state her request for the record and to ensure that all members of the board can hear her. Ms. Shepherd?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and fellow members of the board. I today am in North Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, spending time with family and am unable to join you in person. I am in a private room with this, which is conducive to allowing me to participate in today's meeting by telephone. If the board goes into closed session today, no third party will be able to hear or otherwise observe the closed meeting.
Anyone was unable to hear Ms. Shepherd's voice, please so indicate by raising your hand, although I think that we all heard that. Thank you, Ms. Shepherd. The board must now vote to, 1, ratify my decision that Ms. Shepherd's request is in accordance with the board's policy on remote participation, and 2, confirm that Ms. Shepherd's voice can be heard by all persons at this location. All in agreement, please state yes when the clerk calls your name. Will the clerk please call the vote, excluding Ms. Shepherd?
Mr. Radford?
Yes.
Mrs. Hooker?
Yes.
Mr. Mahoney?
Yes.
Mr. North?
Yes, thank you. It is confirmed that Ms. Shepherd's request is in accordance with our policy and all that can hear her. Her remote participation is approved. Item number 2, roll call. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Radford?
Yes.
Mrs. Hooker?
Yes.
Mr. Mahoney?
Here.
Mrs. Shepherd?
Here.
Mr. North?
Yes. Item B, request to postpone, add to, or change the order of agenda items. Are there any requests to postpone, add to, or change the order of the agenda, fellow board members?
No, sir.
No, sir.
Thank you. Mr. Kaywood,
No changes, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Lubeck,
No changes, sir. Thank you.
thank you. Item C, new business. Item 1, resolution supporting smart scale applications by Roanoke County, the Roanoke Valley Transportation Planning Organization, and the City of Roanoke. Chair recognizes Megan Cronice, Assistant Director of Planning. Welcome, Megan.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. I'm here every 2 years about this time to talk about Smart Scale, and the applications that we'll go through culminate about 18 months worth of work on some of these for applications every 2 years. So a brief overview, we will go through project updates from previous rounds briefly, then projects for round 6, which is the current round we're applying for, one City of Roanoke submission, lessons we've learned and continue to implement, and then next steps. So for project updates from previous rounds, I like to include this because it shows all of the things that we've had funded through this program over a variety of rounds starting in 2015 when the program was eligible for application. So there's a number of projects here that have been completed. The last project is the Roanoke River Greenway from Green Hill Park to Riverside Park, which was an application by the Transportation Planning Organization, which is under construction for Phase 1. So this does include a piece of the 143 to 141 Interstate 81 project for $30 million, but that's $44.5 million for round 1. For round 2, we have also all these projects complete, which included, again, the partner project for 143 to 141 on Interstate 81, which was applied for through the TPO and funded at $32 million. This was $35.4 million for 4 projects. Round 3, the Route 419, Route 220 diverging diamond interchange is actually moving towards the bid letting on July 24th, so we should know very soon, hopefully by late August, who the recipient of that contract will be, and that will be for construction of the diverging diamond interchange as well as the signal improvements down Route 220 all the way to Henry County. So that's a big project we've been working on for a long time, and we're excited that it is moving towards construction later this year. The Williamson Road pedestrian improvements project from Peters Creek to Plantation was also completed this year. So that fills in a gap in pedestrian accommodations in the Hollins area. This is $13.5 million for round 3. In round 4, we were very successful with a number of projects funded. The Starkey Road, Buck Mountain Road intersection improvements project was completed this year, so we're thrilled that that is complete. The Valley Point Parkway realignment project, preliminary engineering is underway. Construction is anticipated in 2027. Route 419 streetscape improvements, Phase 2 from Ogden to Starkey. We had the design public hearing in this building last month, and construction is anticipated in 2026. And then we have 3 separate projects that were combined into one project by VDOT on Route 460, Challenger Avenue, between West Riordan Road and Cloverdale Road, alternate Route 220. And there will be a design public hearing held at Bonsack Elementary on August 22nd. We haven't started advertising this yet, but that will be coming up soon, which will include all of these projects plus a city project, with construction anticipated in 2026 and 2027. In round 5, this was just the last round that we applied for. We did have 2 projects that were applied for on our behalf by the Roanoke Valley Transportation Planning Organization. Along Route 419, we had pedestrian crossing improvements at Route 419 at Postal Drive and Brambleton Avenue funded, as well as Route 419 improvements from Stony Brook Drive to Grand Road Extension in the Oak Grove area that was also funded for $10.5 million total. That engineering will start soon with construction anticipated in 2027. Oh, let me go back. The best part, all of there are 19 projects funded, including those 2 I-81 projects, for a total of $156 million in all rounds. When you take out the I-81 projects, it's still $94 million worth of projects in Roanoke County. So it's a pretty great tally. We've been very successful, and I believe the most successful jurisdiction in the Salem district at not only number of projects, but total funding. So we're very proud of that and are working on the next round, round 6. Do you have any questions on the previous projects before we move on?
Go ahead,
Keep
Doug.
going. All right.
I have questions.
Okay.
We have comments.
So the Starkey Road, Ogden Road streetscape improvements, this is a project funded by Roanoke County that we initiated in early 2023. So this is one of those 18-month projects. It continues to implement the 419 Town Center Plan that you adopted in 2019. It targets property owners and tenants to be impacted by the project, so we did not send things to the whole 419 Town Center area. We were focusing on these corridors where we would be impacting business property. We had a community meeting in fall of 2023 with a survey, and then we had more community engagement this winter with a February community meeting and 50 surveys completed. So this view is pretty small, and let me see if I can flip to my paper version to be able to tell you all of the wonderful things that we've included in this project. So what we looked at were Starkey Road from 419 to Ogden, and Ogden Road from the Railroad Bridge to 419 to fill in the gap that we have in the 419 Town Center area. And there are a number of things that we looked at, and we've narrowed down to what we think is a competitive project, which includes sidewalk along Ogden Road to connect the Lewis Gale Emergency Department property to the Railroad Bridge sidewalk up the hill. Also along Starkey Road from Ogden Road to the Eastern Old Country Plaza entrance in front of Mill Mountain Coffee and Tea. It's also a new traffic signal at the Ogden-Starkey intersection with pedestrian signals and crosswalks. Currently, there are none in that location, and it's actually a span wire signal when most of our signals are mast arm. We're also including bicycle lanes on Ogden Road between Starkey Road and the Railroad Bridge, and eventually the city would like to connect to those to continue up Ogden Road. Also bicycle lanes along Starkey Road from Ogden Road to Route 419, which will connect with the Route 419 Phase 2 project that is in design. We also have changes along Ogden Road. There's a northbound continuous right turn lane that continues on and on and on up past the Railroad Bridge that we've reallocated for bicycle lanes between Starkey Road and the Railroad Bridge. There's also the southbound left turn lane into Tanglewood Mall that we were able to shorten. Right now, it is very long. There's a lot of pavement as you continue to the bridge and over the bridge. We're reallocating that pavement. There's also the Old Country Plaza right slip lane. We modified that to slow vehicle speeds because the way that it's oriented right now, cars can really travel at speed. Into Old Country Plaza, we'd like to reduce that angle so that cars have to slow down, especially when there's a pedestrian crossing there, to hopefully minimize conflicts with pedestrians. We also looked at the Valley Metro bus stop that's on the city side of the Railroad Bridge, and we proposed, in working with the city and Valley Metro, to move that bus stop to the south side of the bridge in Roanoke County, where we'll have more space for a better accommodation than a sign along a dirt path on the other side of the bridge. So we can hopefully put in a bus shelter at some point in the future. Any questions on Starkey and Ogden?
Have we gotten any information back, or do we have plans to get the information back from VDOT on the traffic measurement from Starkey across to Ogden?
We don't have a date set for that yet, but we're reaching out to VDOT just to coordinate them to come back, probably in work session.
Okay.
I would say certainly by, early August at the latest.
Thank you. Anyone else have any questions? Thank you, Megan. Thank you,
Next
Richard.
project, this is Carson Road safety improvements. This is another Roanoke County study that was funded by the county and initiated in early 2023 at the same time as Starkey and Ogden. This implements the Route 460 land use and connectivity study that you adopted in 2023. It again targets property owners and renters to be impacted by the project. We had fall 23 community engagement with a meeting in November, as well as a survey, and then winter engagement with a community meeting in March with a survey with that as well. So the Carson Road safety improvements, we looked at the entire corridor from Challenger Avenue all the way to the city of Roanoke, which was a long corridor, and what we narrowed the project down to be as competitive as possible is to replace the one-lane wide Carson Road Bridge over a tributary of Glade Creek with a double box culvert allowing for 2 travel lanes. This came out very loud and clear in the 460 land use and connectivity study as one of the most significant issues in this area was the Carson Road Bridge was an issue. We heard it time and time again. We also would like to realign the Challenger Avenue Carson Road intersection by separating the Carson Road travel lanes with a concrete median to reduce crashes. That is one thing that came up as part of the study is a very high crash rate on Challenger at Carson. Part of that is not having a right turn lane to be able to slow down to turn right onto Carson. While we can't necessarily fix that inexpensively because of the tributary of Glade Creek that runs underneath 460. We are trying to improve the actual throat of that roadway to separate those lanes, to try to separate traffic so we don't have crashes. Any questions on that project?
No, needed, very, very much needed there.
The next project is Route 11460 and Dow Hollow Road intersection improvements. This is a VDOT and Office of Intermodal Planning and Investment funded study initiated in mid-2023. It implements the Glenbrook Community Plan, which you adopted in 2012. VDOT conducted summer 2023 engagement with 241 surveys completed, and then we had a community meeting in February with 74 attendees at the Glenbrook Library and 487 surveys completed.
Quick question on that.
Yes, ma'am.
I mean, that is a huge number of surveys completed and involvement from the community. I don't feel like that is typical.
It was fantastic response to the survey. I think with the summer survey, it coincided with a fatality on the corridor. So then there was a lot of response and concern about this intersection. It is a very high crash intersection. It is our #1 intersection in our Safe Streets and Roads for All study. So it's definitely a problem, and we've known that, and we are optimistic that this resolution will help improve safety on this corridor, because it's a bad intersection. The 487 surveys completed in the winter, I think it also helped that we had WSLS come to most, if not all, of our community meetings. So we were also getting a lot of visibility from the media. So it's folks that might not have gotten our mailing or follow us on social media, heard it on the news and tuned in and filled out the survey. So we were very pleased with those results.
Good.
The concept that we decided upon was a 2-lane wide peanut-style roundabout to improve traffic flow and safety at this intersection at West Main Street and Dow Hollow Road. It also catches the Fallbrook Drive intersection, where there's a fairly high crash rate at Fallbrook Drive and West Main Street as well, at the Exxon and Witch Witch. And it also provides access to the vacant property across from Dow Hollow Road, which is located here. This is vacant property zoned residentially. The approaching speed limit from both directions would be reduced from 55 miles an hour to 45 miles an hour. And the Roanoke Valley Transportation Planning Organization staff will submit this project on behalf of Roanoke County. And the RVTPO approved $4 million in STB Surface Transportation Block Grant leverage for this project just last month. So we appreciate that additional funding, which hopefully will reduce the overall project cost and hopefully make this as competitive as possible. This is also an I-81 detour route, so we know that this intersection gets very congested when I-81 has problems. So we're hopeful that this application will be successful. Yes, ma'am.
I've had a lot of comments from constituents on this peanut roundabout, and, you know, I know that I've talked to administration about it before too, and they say that there always tends to be some skepticism about these, and then after the fact, citizens tend to like them. This one is unique just because of the shape and the severity of the issues going on there. I've had several citizens who have said something to me about rumble strips, and I think VDOT probably hates rumble strips, but they're concerned about the speed coming down West Main Street into the peanut, and afraid that the speed is just going to be too fast to make the curves, and that there may be signage, but it's not enough warning of how important it is to slow down.
Good
Yeah.
point.
I think rumble strips are a fairly inexpensive measure that could be implemented if this project is funded as part of the preliminary engineering phase. I think the challenge with rumble strips, especially in residential areas, is they're noisy. So they're better for locations where there aren't a lot of residences, and I know there are some in this vicinity, not a whole lot, but still some. So that's something that we would definitely get into as part of the design.
So it's still to
When it's
come,
funded.
to get down to those kind of details. But it's not totally, it's a possibility, is what I'm hearing you say, that something like that
That's
could
something
be done.
we could absolutely
Okay.
ask. I think
That's
the
good.
other challenge, and we've had a lot of changes to the smart scale process in the last 8 to 9 months, and VDOT is being very careful with, you know, what you ask for is what you get. So that's something I can ask about now to see if we can make sure that that ends up in the project. While I believe rumble strips are fairly inexpensive, they're being very strict and
I understand.
very careful with their estimates. And from what I understand, this one is going to be very expensive because there's a lot of grading involved to try to flatten out the grade so that it's not a roundabout on a decline or.
Right.
So it will not be an inexpensive project.
something to the effect of a flashing light, slow with a flashing light approaching intersection or something like that would help, because doing nothing is, someone's going to come down there and they're going to realize too late when they get in the curve, they can't navigate 45 around that.
Well, I think it just says something that it's where our most crashes are in Roanoke County. So we need to really look at it carefully and look at all the options to make sure it's safe going forward.
And I think, Mr. North, to your point, the speed within the roundabout would be much lower than that, but at least approaching it on either end, there would be a reduction in speed limit. So hopefully people are paying attention and starting to slow down so that
I
they
hope
can
so.
It goes
travel
from,
through it and not off of it.
so it says it goes from 55 to 45. Are you saying internally to the roundabout,
It would be
though?
approaching it. Inside the roundabout, typically the speeds are slower.
Yeah, good.
Just to make the curve.
Exactly.
Thank you.
The next project is Peters Creek Road, Williamson Road, multimodal safety improvements. This is another VDOT and OIP-funded study that was initiated in 2023. It implements the Holland Center Plan, which you adopted in 2020. We had summer engagement with 494 surveys completed, and winter engagement with a community meeting in March at the Hollins Library, and then 928 surveys completed. So these numbers are even higher than on West Main Street at Dow Hollow, which was fantastic. There's a lot going on this slide, and I will get to the graphics, I promise, but the reason I put all of this together is because this corridor study, we broke up in a variety of ways. So we asked the Transportation Planning Organization to submit the study for us through the High Priority Program pot of money. In order to do that, they have to submit the whole project from Woodhaven to Plantation, which is enormous, and I don't think it's going to be successful because it's enormous. So when we found out that the TPO could only submit the entire corridor, we said, well, then we need to break it up into smaller, more manageable pieces. So the middle option is picking the roundabout at Williamson and Peters Creek Road, and then adding on turn lane improvements at Plantation Road. And I'll get to that graphic in a minute. The TPO approved $3.6 million in leverage through Surface Transportation Block Grant funds for that project, which we very much appreciate. So we're optimistic about that application. The second Roanoke County application will be the Peters Creek end. And we are currently working on what we can pick out of the study along the Peters Creek corridor that will be competitive. What we're focused on is the Airport Road intersection, because there's a lot of improvements proposed there. It's a very high crash intersection. And then picking out as many other pieces that we think have high benefit and low cost to combine into one project to submit. And I got an email from our consultant last night that said, this is the number we're looking at. What do you think? And I was like, definitely don't go bigger. Don't add anything else. And is there anything we can cut that we don't think there's going to be much benefit for, to try to keep that project relatively lean and mean while addressing the airport Archcrest intersection? So that's why I had all this broken up, to show in comparison the full projects on the left. Submission 1 is the roundabout with Plantation. Submission 2 is whatever we think we can fit in the Peters Creek application to make it as competitive as we can. So, and I know that this is probably hard to see also. This graphic shows all of the corridor improvements that are proposed, starting at Woodhaven down this way with a through cut at Woodhaven. This is also the city-county boundary. The intersection is the city of Roanoke. Just past the intersection is where the road turns to VDOT maintained. Then we have a closure at Newland, I believe. Sorry, it's hard for me to see too. Then we have improvements at the Airport Archcrest intersection here, as well as R-cuts, restricted crossing U-turns here, and more restricted crossing U-turns in front of Bojangles. We know the schools are handling the intersection on their own at Alpine. Then on the lower graphic, we have more restricted crossing U-turns. We have improvements at Barron's Road, and then more restricted crossing U-turns here, leading up to the roundabout at Kroger and North Market Village, and then we have turn lane improvements at Plantation. So it's a very large corridor with a lot of improvements, and I think the cost estimate is going to be sky high, 70 million plus. I just really don't think it's going to be fundable, but we'll see. So this first submission, again, this is the roundabout at Peters Creek and Williamson, and then turn lane improvements at Williamson and Plantation. This is in front of Sunnybrook Auto Spa and in front of CVS. Adding right turn lanes to help traffic flow at that intersection should help quite a bit. And then the next project, this is the Peters Creek section where we have a number of improvements, but really focusing on that Airport Arch Crest intersection, which has a high crash rate with a through-cut configuration with pedestrian accommodations, as well as some realignments here for the frontage road and Burlington Drive. Then we are not going to submit the Barron's Road intersection because the improvements that are proposed there really aren't addressing a significant safety need, so we don't think that will be all that competitive. And then we have a number of restricted crossing U-turns with turn lane improvements like we've seen in a variety of other locations across the county. Were there any questions on Williamson, Peters Creek before we move on?
So if you were dictator for the day and you could only get one, would you wish
Unlimited
for
funds?
submission 1 or submission 2?
Oh, I'd want the TPO application. I want the whole thing. But if, I think the Peters Creek Williamson roundabout is key to the whole corridor, and that's why we requested TPO leverage funding for that roundabout. So I think that intersection is, it needs work. And it's already been reworked at least once. So this will be at least the second time it's been reworked.
It will definitely improve the fluidity, which is gridlocked for the most part during the evening especially.
Yeah.
And it's also an Interstate 81 detour route. So it gets very congested when there's a crash and folks are routed Plantation to Peters Creek to Williamson, Plantation to Williamson to Peters Creek to 581.
It would seem that submission 1 would have the priority.
That's where we put the money, the leverage funding.
And we'll
So,
see what the formula says, the
Yes,
smart scale formula.
yes.
And plus, we're going to talk to Dr. Smoot too, so he can know what he's going to advocate for us.
Well, and again, the rules have changed substantially with this round, more so than any other round. So we're doing the best we can to try to figure out what will be most competitive without any real good frame of reference, because the scores have changed in a variety of ways. It's been incredibly difficult. This round has been 10 times worse than any other round that we've gone through. So we'll see. City of Roanoke submission, this is actually an application, it's a piece, this is the third iteration of this project. So we had funding from the TPO to do a study in 2018, 2019 for the whole exit, 581 at exit 2, at Peters Creek Road, looking at reconfigurations on both sides of the interchange to try to make the intersection work better and to facilitate traffic flow to the Woodhaven Technology Park. So that application was not funded. So we broke it down into a smaller application for round 5. And we had leverage funding for the ramp piece right here, which is outlined in red, $4 million from the TPO, which covered the cost of the ramp. And we leveraged that for this left turn lane improvement at Valley Point Parkway. So what we're proposing is a double left turn lane to turn up Valley Point to access Woodhaven Technology Park. So that application was also unsuccessful in Smart Scale. But what we did is we had enough funding with the $4 million of leverage that we got to start the ramp project. So the ramp project is funded exclusively through Surface Transportation Block Grant funding, and that is underway with construction anticipated in 2025. And I think that ramp improvement, which is pulling the ramp to the west, having a double right turn lane that's signalized, will really help the function and flow of Peters Creek Road, because when it's your turn to get onto Peters Creek, you're going to have a controlled intersection where you can turn right safely. You don't have to look over your shoulder.
Right.
You can just make the turn. And then you've got even more space to be able to get over to turn left onto Valley Point Parkway to get to Green Ridge and to get to Woodhaven Technology Park. So that'll be a great improvement. We're glad that it's moving forward. VDOT's administering that project. So what we're trying for, again, is the left turn lane to Valley Point Parkway. And with all of the changes that the CTB made with Smart Scale late last year, their scenarios showed that this project would have been funded had they made all those changes during round 5. So we said, hey, VDOT, would you please submit this application for us again? Can we please work on this one again? Because it shows that with all the new reworked criteria, this one may be successful. So that's what we're doing. So we really haven't made any changes to it. VDOT's working on the estimate. We had asked the Transportation Planning Organization submit it, but because it was not the recommended scenario out of that old study, they were unable to do so. So I called up my colleague in the city, Dwayne Darden, and I said, Dwayne, this is a city road. Would you pretty please submit this application for us? And he said yes. So we're very grateful to the city for taking this on. It'll be a city signal anyway. The other signal at the ramp is a city signal, so it makes a lot of sense, and we really appreciate their collaboration and partnership. So that is this project. It's a new traffic signal as well, with pedestrian signals and crosswalks, grading for a future sidewalk, and a small section of bicycle lanes. Lessons we've learned to continue to implement. Planning is critical to set project foundations. So, I've referenced planning studies, corridor studies with each of these applications that are setting the foundation for what we want to implement, and we're implementing with these applications. We continue to lean on VDOT. They've been great despite all the changes. Anytime we reach out, VDOT is incredibly helpful. And those two studies are quite expensive, and we really do appreciate their partnership with those studies. Maximize regional sources for leverage of funds. So thank you very much to our TPO members, Mr. North and Mr. Radford, for the SCBG leverage funding. That was a different process this year, but we were appreciative of those funds to help us buy down the cost of those applications and hopefully make them competitive. Regional collaboration and flexibility is key. Again, working with the city for them to submit our application that we didn't have the space to was very helpful. And then adapting to constantly changing smart scale and VDOT Salem district requirements is critical to maximize application competitiveness. So in addition to all of the new things that Smart Scale Central Office and OIP put in place, the Salem district also said, oh, and we have all these other deadlines and all these other meetings. So we're doing the best we can with our outstanding consultants to meet all of those deadlines and have solid applications. I will be interested to see what our final estimates end up being, but we will hope for the best. Next steps, August 1 is our Smart Scale application deadline. January 25, we will have the recommended funding scenario from OIP. In June of 25, the 6-year plan will be adopted by the Commonwealth Transportation Board, and then the awarded funding is typically programmed through the 6-year improvement program. Typically, within 2 years, we can kind of get the preliminary engineering phase rolling. I think VDOT's also realized that with costs climbing as fast as they do, that they need to jump on things much faster and not let them sit and accrue money. They need to go, which works to our advantage for sure. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions?
Yes, sir. Ms. Cronise, please go back to slide number 7. The concern that I have is with respect to the, I guess, decision or proposal of the project that would prevent people from driving on Starkey, going directly across Starkey, across 419 to the other side of Starkey. Of all the VDOT design public hearings I've ever attended over the last 5 years, this is the only one that I received a raft of negative complaints about that concept and that idea. So I guess my question is, since that was round 4, and that's 3 to 4 years ago, is it too late to alter that? Because if we had a VDOT design public hearing on June 17th of this year, I would hope that there would be an opportunity to change that. I'm not a traffic engineer. It makes absolutely no sense to me if we want to alleviate congestion on 419, that if I'm driving on Starkey, I can't go straight across 419. I have to make a right onto 419 and then do a U-turn. Or I could go all the way down to Ogden and make a left, and then make a left onto Starkey, and then that'll take me to make a right back on 419 if I want to go to Salem. That seems to be lacking in common sense. And this is not just something to make folks in Hunting Hills happy. I think if you go down Starkey, you have all the residential development on your left with the apartments and the townhouses. You have Friendship Manor. You go further down Starkey, you get to Buck Mountain, and we have a whole series of residential subdivisions on Buck Mountain. I don't know how many of those people would cross over Starkey to go to the other side. They may turn left onto 419, but they may want to avoid 419. And I know personally, from my perspective, many times I'll come down Starkey, cross over, and I'll go past Tanglewood West, past Buffalo Wild Wings. Of course, if you want to go Buffalo Wild Wings, that's a great opportunity to get there. But a lot of times I'll continue and then access Tanglewood from what I call the back door that's at Ogden. And a lot of times I can go around the rear of Tanglewood to either get to Kroger or to get to Barnes and Noble. So as I said, I'm worried that maybe I fell asleep on this and I missed this design component that says you can't cross over 419. I'd like to make a change in that. Is that too late to make a change in round 4 of, I'm assuming that plan was the Route 419 streetscape improvements Phase 2? Or is that under round 6? Which round has the silliness to prevent me from going directly across 419 on Starkey? Round 4 or
So
round 6?
it's called a through-cut. It's a through-cut configuration for the intersection.
It's called a through-cut.
A through-cut.
How do we
And-
eliminate the through-cut?
And it was part of the project that we submitted in round 4.
Okay,
So that project came about, we actually wanted to submit Route 419 Phase 2 in round 3, but then walked it with VDOT and found a number of issues that we needed to spend more time considering before we submitted the application. So Roanoke County hired Caldwell White to survey the corridor as a first step to find out what all is going on that section of road. And actually, we wanted to submit from 220 to Starkey in round 1, and that was too big. So we cut it down and did Ogden to 220, and then this is, of course, Ogden to Starkey. And then VDOT took the survey that we did and worked on a concept in-house to incorporate all of the things that we wanted to do, which was basically to extend the improvements between 220 and Ogden to the next block. So we had 3 lanes in each direction, so we wanted to add that 3rd lane. We wanted to add the bicycle lanes, which we had on the Tanglewood block. We wanted to add sidewalks. The through-cut was their idea, VDOT's idea, and that came about when they did traffic counts, and they saw that the volume of traffic that's crossing over Route 419 from one side of Starkey to the other side of Starkey is a very small percentage in relation to the larger traffic volume at that intersection. And Starkey to 220 along Route 419 is our highest volume corridor in the entire county. It used to be about 43,000 trips a day. Now it's about 38,000 trips a day. In the last 5-6 years, it's dropped somewhat. But it's still our busiest corridor. And to improve traffic flow and safety, the through-cut is one of the tools in their toolbox that they've been using, and we've talked about it many times across the valley. To do that is to improve traffic flow, to take that phase, the signal phase where you cross over Route 419 and reallocate that green time to all of the other phases so that you're not stopped at that light all the time. And I know when I leave here, the only time I get a gap in traffic, I always hit that red light at Starkey as I'm heading towards Tanglewood Mall. So
I'm not arguing with you, I'm just saying it sounds silly to take all the traffic that would come from Starkey to dump it back onto 419 if you wanted to go straight across. I don't understand how that minimizes the traffic flow on 419 from Starkey to 220. If anything, it adds to that. Is there going to be one left turn lane from Starkey onto 419 heading to Salem? Or is there
Yes.
going to continue to have the 2
There'll be one
lanes
left
to make
turn
the
lane
left?
and one right turn lane. The other thing you can do is at Bernard, at First Citizens, you can turn right and go back up Fallowwater, Bernard and Fallowwater, to get to Old Country Plaza, and then up to the Tanglewood area. So you can go left and take a right at Bernard. You can also go right and go down to the restricted crossing U-turn that's proposed at Ridgetop Road and make a U-turn there. Or you could go up to Ogden, as you stated, and come around that way. There are a variety of ways to go. I think the other thing you could do is you could turn, if you're on Starkey headed towards Holiday Inn, you could turn left on Penn Forest and then go down to the Chaparral Light if you're heading towards Salem, I'm sorry, we're heading towards the other side of Starkey. You could either come out Bernard and take a right to go left, or you could go down to the Chaparral Signal and go right. And I know it's roundabout, and I didn't like it either. When they first proposed it, I said, this is not going to go over well. And they said, well, but this is something that's needed at this intersection, and it's a big part of the Smart Scale score. This was a
I just think
$19 million project that we
I
did
think we're
submit.
adding more traffic onto 419. We're harming the businesses that are on the other side of Starkey, starting with the hotel, starting with the offices that are on the left and the right, and then Tanglewood West. I think we're harming our own citizens. So is it too late to make a change, or do I have to vote no on the resolution for under number 1, Starkey Road, Ogden Road streetscape improvements?
Well, the Starkey Road, Ogden Road project
That's 6, round
doesn't
6.
have anything to do with the through cut at 419. We're just adding bicycle lanes on Starkey Road.
Okay.
So that's completely separate.
So in other words, you're telling me I'm too late?
So if we were to take out, if we told VDOT we don't want the through cut anymore, then it would have to be reevaluated without the through cut in the score, and it's likely that the project would not have been funded because we would have taken out that significant benefit at that intersection, and it would likely kill the project. The other thing is the Board of Supervisors could request that the CTV cancel the project, and we could potentially do that, but I also think we would need to potentially pay back VDOT all of the money that they've spent up to this point in preliminary engineering. So I think we could take it out, but I think it would have larger repercussions.
Dr. Smoot told us that when you have your projects, make sure that's what you want when you submit them. So to go through the traps we'd have to run on this might send a signal that we're a little wishy-washy. I'm not disputing what he's saying. And I think that the volume of traffic, when we find out about it, is going to dump it on 419. Then you're going to have people backed up trying to make U-turns. That's going to add to congestion and backup. So it's not a good idea.
Well, we're going to back all the way
Yes.
up on Starkey,
Yeah.
past the rack.
So,
And if any development occurs on that side of Starkey, we're harming that.
Yeah.
And if we're forcing everybody coming on Starkey that they can't cross over 419, making a right, all our plans for development, how much money did the board spend on, what do we call it, Ridgetop, to go up to Chuck E. Cheese? That's going to make that more of a traffic mess. I guess I'm just, I guess I wasn't paying attention at the time we submitted this thing a couple of years ago. This is going to be a disaster.
Don't we have the same thing going on 220, though?
Yes.
Right there
Yeah.
at Fleet Feet, and there's
Right.
going to be a future no straight across there
Correct.
also,
Right, yep.
with the
Yes.
same understanding that it's just making the greens longer for the other directions.
They're
Yes.
doing it on they're doing it on 462.
Yes.
It's the VDOT new mode to reduce traffic congestion.
Stop
and-
times.
And it's being used all over the state of Virginia.
No, I understand it, and I understand the argument.
Sometimes.
It just, I know all the residential development that's back up Starkey, up to Buck Mountain Road. In effect, if you wanted to go across, and I understand what Megan is saying, they did a traffic study, and there's not that many cars that cross over. But those that do, we're going to dump them to make a right, and then, great safety, hey, I'm going to make a U-turn on 419. Wow. Let me take my life in my hands. 220. Or I go all the way to Ogden and make a left and make another left. I can see everybody coming down Bernard to circle around, as Megan described.
I've been using Starkey because my construction warehouse is back there on Starkey. I never go straight,
Really?
never. I go left or right,
Okay.
never. And if we had more green time there going in that direction, it would help the traffic. I think you're going the wrong way. I think it's going to help congestion and not
Okay.
make it worse. And so it's like the same thing that's going to happen. Us Lowe's guys that want to dash over to Home Depot, now we're going to have to go out, circle around, and go back to get to Home Depot. Because we're always going back and forth. Because they don't have something to go across the street to buy
Yeah.
it.
They usually start at Home Depot instead. Then take a left and
Yeah,
and a
okay,
right
yeah,
in
yeah,
at
yeah,
Lowe's.
left.
So start at Home Depot.
There you go.
Y'all haven't seen any problems yet until they start doing 419.
We do all our shopping at Lowe's because it's in the county, by the way.
Understand.
Well, you know, Mr. Radford,
Just want to let you know.
you know,
Clarification.
your point's right on target with respect to that. If you recall, we asked the Sheets applicant specifically about that. Does that in any way limit or restrict or impede their plans? And they said no.
Yeah.
So I wish them luck.
Well, that's the
And
very
Mr.
first thing I
Chairman-
proposed as part of that. When they started talking to us, I said, did you know there's a VDOT project?
Yeah.
Yeah, if I could just jump in again, and I know Chairman North brought this up at the beginning, but he and I talked about this last week, and obviously there was a lot of feedback at the public hearing. I was there as well. And I do think it would be good to have VDOT come and speak to these issues, because ultimately they're doing the design work on the project. They've done the analysis, and just as we did with 220, let them speak to some of these questions, because certainly I think it makes perfect sense for us to ask them to come in to do that, because we did get a lot of feedback, and I've gotten some as well from folks who have businesses on Starkey. And I tend to do what Supervisor Mahoney does myself as a driver. If I'm going to, say, the ATM at Wells Fargo, I just kind of go across. So I think we'd like to get that scheduled, to have them come and speak to both sort of the rationale behind the design the way it sits today, but also what are our options at this stage? How would that affect the project? And let them speak to all those questions. And again, we're going to work to get that set.
And the other aspect of that, Mr. Kaywood, is I don't want to put the county in a position where we have to reimburse
Right.
millions of dollars to VDOT for redesign.
Correct.
Or to lose the entire project. And so that, in my mind, calls into question, what the heck good is a public hearing on June 17th,
Well-
2024, when it really doesn't mean anything? You can't make any changes, you can't respond to citizen comments. Are we misleading our citizens by having a public hearing? Is this for show, or does this mean anything?
I do think that's a fundamental challenge I brought up a number of times with Smart Scale in general, is that you can't really spend money on design work until you have a funded project. And once you have a funded project, you're kind of locked into
You're
a
stuck.
very early concept. So that, I do think that's just fundamental to that as a process. But I think that said, I would still think it would be a good idea for us to just have them come and speak to what options may or may not be there, and let them answer, some of the questions that Megan has been ably fielding, just because I think they did do that with 220, and I think that was helpful to the board then. And I think this would be, a great, probably work session or briefing that they could do with the board at a, near future meeting, just because we did get a lot of public input on this particular movement.
Could we add the peanut roundabout to that conversation also? Thank you.
Absolutely.
Dr. Smoot's already concerned about the peanut roundabout.
Yeah.
He doesn't think that there's going to be a problem with trucks backing up trying to navigate around the peanut. That was his concern. So I will just say this, there's another VDOT hearing on August 22nd, and Philip announced it to the 40-plus people from that area that attended last Tuesday at the Planning Commission. And here again, that's just a box they're checking, but the benefit here, unlike probably on 419 with traffic flow to get to the other side of Ogden, is safety improvements. That's the key. And so VDOT needs to have on their best uniform and presentation, because folks are concerned about, in particular, one of the U-turns going to the country market, which I think now will have to go down and make a U-turn back up there, because that today is a dangerous place. I see cars making a last-minute effort to turn left in there, and there's traffic coming up over the hill. I almost had a rear ender there on the day myself. So we need to get some of these done for the benefit of safety and saving lives. And this is the public's chance to come out and talk. But to your point, Richard, it's already funded. It's ready to go. Two of the biggest projects are the 460, 220 intersection improvements. I'm talking about, that's the big elephant in the room, and the other one's 419, 220. And so I hope we can get through those two before we throw any more in the mix, because it's really going to be a challenge for the 15 or 18 months we're going to have to work around that backup and construction work. So I hope that that's a safe period of time as well. Any more questions for Megan?
No.
If there are none, is there a motion to approve the resolution?
So move.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Is there any discussion on the motion? I will just make a few comments. Number one, Megan, I've heard a lot of presentations before, but this is probably one of the most beneficial summarized presentations that I've heard that you presented, and I want to thank you and your staff. I also want to say, isn't it great? Isn't it just wonderful that we got $156.3 million of projects using state funds and federal funds, because some of that was leveraged funds, and I don't think we hardly used any county money on this. So that's the thing that I reminded Philip the other night. When you're telling people about a meeting, tell them that these are state funds, because the funds that come from the state for the state road network is huge, and so we don't have to use our county money for most of this. And I just also want to say that it resonated with regionality, and not only regionality, but the local Roanoke County area as well, because Woodhaven is a regional project. The improvements by the city filing that project for us was a great tactic. Everything is regional, and all the regional people on the TPO with Supervisor Radford and I, they all bought into all these changes. So it was people that don't represent Roanoke County that voted for approvals on these, and I thank Supervisor Radford for that support in the voting of the Transportation Planning Organization. So great presentation. I want you to know that. And I don't offer compliments too often, but I do know this, your staff is doing a great job on this. Now that Mr. Kaywood doesn't come to all of our meetings, we're moving right on down the road, aren't we? I'm just kidding, Richard. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Radford?
Yes.
Mrs. Hooker?
Yes.
Mr. Mahoney?
Yes.
Mrs. Shepherd?
Yes.
Mr. North?
Yes. And Richard, that's a compliment to you, because we know if we have a problem with VDOT, we come to you to help us out.
Thank you, sir.
All right, thank you. Let's move on to item D, first reading of ordinances. Ordinance amending the fiscal year 23-24 budget for the general operating revenues and expenditures by $6 million and appropriating 1.5 to the county's capital fund and 4.5 to the general government fund. Lori Gearhart, Director of Finance and Management Services. Welcome, Lori.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. This item brings forward for your consideration an amendment to the fiscal year 23-24 operating budget by $6 million. During the budget process for the fiscal year 24-25, we discussed this budget amendment to address the required contributions to the unappropriated fund balance and our general expenditure contingency to be in compliance with our comprehensive financial policy, as well as using funds for our fiscal year 25 capital improvement program. County staff have also had discussions with the board throughout fiscal year 23-24 on the general fund operating budget revenues. Real estate taxes are trending above budget due to the real estate tax assessment being higher than the growth assumed when the budget was developed. We are also anticipating very modest growth in personal property taxes as well as bank franchise tax. Public service court taxes have grown significantly due to the increase in property assessments, and interest income is above budget due to the interest rates rising over the past fiscal year. Business license tax growth is attributable to the strong economy being experienced nationwide. Staff has also shared how the expenditures have been performing during the fiscal year. Currently, our program for tax relief for the elderly and disabled is well over budget, and we are still making accruals back for the fiscal year. We have been experiencing overages in fuel, utilities, contracted repairs, as prices have risen across the country for these items. Funds have been added to these line items for the current fiscal year 24-25 budget. The proposed budget amendment before you will allow for correction for expenditure line items that are currently over budget and bring our unappropriated fund balance and general expenditure contingency to the appropriate levels to be in compliance with our comprehensive financial policy for the fiscal year 24-25 budget. So staff recommends approval of the first reading of the ordinance and scheduling the second reading for July 23rd.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve the first reading of the ordinance
Motion to approve.
and schedule a second reading for July 23rd, 2024?
Second.
Motion, yes, second. Okay, any discussion on that motion? Just one question, I'm curious. You mentioned that we were challenged with some elderly tax relief, but also, I think it was, lost my place. What drove that increase? Is that the program we're getting ready to hear about later on?
Yes,
Is
sir.
that the largest part of that component, which is the senior exemption?
Yes, and the disabled veterans.
Yeah,
We kind of look
okay.
at those together.
Okay.
And the disabled veterans was something that was passed
Yeah.
not that terribly long ago.
Yeah, that was
And-
mandated by the state.
Correct. And they can actually apply backwards, and so it's kind of been like this catch-up.
Catch up.
And so we're trying to figure out where it stops, and at this point, we haven't been able to quite land on that yet.
Wow.
The state's recent debate in the General Assembly with one house passing something, the other house still debating it, I guess we got to watch for that too, because it could also impact this category. Okay, thank you very much. With that said, then, will the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Radford?
Yes.
Mrs. Hooker?
Yes.
Mr. Mahoney?
Yes.
Mrs. Shepherd?
Yes.
Mr. North?
Yes. Thank you, Laurie. Item E, second reading of ordinances and public hearings. Item 1, ordinance amending Chapter 8.1 of the Roanoke County Code and repealing Chapter 23 of the Roanoke County Code in order to create a consolidated erosion and stormwater management program ordinance. Tarek Lanier, Director of Development Services. Welcome, Tarek.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, member of the board. As the chairman mentioned, this ordinance or the public hearing and the second reading for the amendment of Chapter 8.1, the Roanoke County, and repealing Chapter 23 of the Roanoke County Ordinance to provide a consolidated erosion and stormwater management program ordinance. Since the first meeting, at the first meeting, I gave full details of the reason we're doing this amendment, but quickly, I want to mention is that the erosion and sediment control has been in place since mid-'70s, and stormwater management became part of the county ordinance in 2014. These two ordinances are being applied to constructions in the field in regards to erosion and sediment control and stormwater management. These have been implemented over the years, but the DEQ decided to consolidate these two regulations and make them one, and provided a model ordinance for all municipalities to use. Roanoke County staff, along with the Office of the County Attorney, helped together to put this ordinance together. And we have made presentation at the last meeting of the little changes that was presented and outlined in the ordinance. During the meeting, several questions came up, and some of these questions generated few changes, and these changes are in the report, but allow me to read them to you. The changes that we have is two small changes have been made to the ordinance since the first reading. The ordinance has been amended to clarify the variants and exceptions to the ordinance. The reference to variances were removed, and the ordinance refers to waivers of the regulations only as exceptions. An additional change was made by adding a provisions allowing the Roanoke County to file for injunction relief in the event of violation of the ordinance. There is no impact of this amendment. Before I read the recommendations, I want to mention one thing, that at the first reading, we have made the recommendations that the ordinance will be effective July 1st. So what we would like to do is, if this ordinance has been approved, we would like to recommend that Thursday, August 1st, 2024, be the effective day of this ordinance. So the recommendation is, the staff recommend that the Board of Supervisors hold a public hearing and approve the second reading of the attached ordinance with the understanding that August 1st, 2024 will be the effective date. I'll be glad to address any questions you might have.
Did you just say August 1st?
August 1st, 2024.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions from Mr. Carmody?
Just a comment. So I'm glad it's being consolidated, so, it's a little easier to read, and the engineers that we engage in development, it'll be, easier for them to go to that. And so glad to see, we're catching on to that and doing that. So thank you for doing that.
Yes, sir.
Anyone else?
So I'm looking at page 122 of the proposed ordinance. So item number 3 should be, instead of saying this ordinance shall become effective immediately upon its adoption, should that be changed or amended to read August 1? Or am I at the wrong page?
Mr. Lubeck?
You see where I am on page, I'm at page 122 of our agenda.
Based on Mr. Munir's comments, I would agree that that language should be changed from immediately upon its adoption to August 1st of
We'll make
2024.
that the motion.
Yeah. A comment to follow up Mr. Radford's. Appreciate staff working with me. As the board may recall, I had a series of questions. I had a long virtual meeting with Mr. Lubeck, Ms. Lowe, Mr. Blunt, and they addressed many of my concerns. I think it is important that many of the, what I call administrative steps, would be handled through a policy document that would be developed by staff as to how the mechanisms of the process works, as opposed to having it laid out in detail in the ordinance. And I think that's important for all of us to realize, that it does provide some flexibility for modifying that policy document as we go forward. And we can, I think, act with a little more flexibility and speed, as opposed to having to bring it back to the board for 2 readings and et cetera. So I think there is some, that's something that concerned me as it initially came up. But I think many of those, what I would call administrative processes, would be addressed through that policy document.
Okay. At this time, we will open the public hearing. Do we have anyone here to speak? No one to speak to this matter? Okay, well then we'll close the public hearing, and I will entertain a motion to accept the consolidation effective August 1st.
Mr. Chairman, I would move that we approve this ordinance at second reading with an amendment that the ordinance would become effective August 1, 2024.
Okay, is there a second?
Second that.
Any discussion on this motion? Clerk, please call the roll.
Mr. Radford?
Yes.
Mrs. Hooker?
Yes.
Mr. Mahoney?
Yes.
Mrs. Shepherd?
Yes.
Mr. North?
Yes. Item F, consent agenda. All matters listed under the consent agenda are considered by the board to be routine and will be enacted by one resolution in the form or forms listed below. If discussion is desired, that item will be removed from the consent agenda and will be considered separately. Does any board member wish to remove any item from the consent agenda for discussion? Okay, is there a motion to adopt all matters on the consent agenda?
Motion to adopt.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion on that motion? Clerk, please call the roll.
Mr. Radford?
Yes.
Mrs. Hooker?
Yes.
Mr. Mahoney?
Yes.
Mrs. Shepherd?
Yes.
Mr. North?
Yes. Item G, citizens' comments and communications. Are there any citizens wanting to address the board that have not submitted a form? Okay. That said, we'll move on to the next item. H, reports. Is there a motion to receive and file the reports that have been included with the agenda under item H?
Move that the reports be received and filed.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion on the motion? There being none, will the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Radford,
Yes.
Mrs. Hooker,
Yes.
Mr. Mahoney,
Yes.
Mrs. Shepherd,
Yes.
Mr. North.
Yes. On item I, reports and inquiries of board members, Ms. Hooker.
I just have a couple of quick comments, Mr. Chairman. First thing is, yesterday we had a delightful bridge dedication in memory of James Buriak, who was a Navy swimmer who died in training and was beloved in our community. Had a fabulous turnout. I think there may have been 150, maybe 200 people there. And it was just really a great moment of memory and recognizing this hero from our community. And I'd like to just have another shout out to staff. I know that there's been some back and forth in email, but our staff did a fabulous job putting this together. There were a lot of moving pieces, and I think right up until maybe a few hours even before the event, we were still adjusting things. And Amy, I think, was supposed to be on vacation for most of that work. And so, but I know it was a whole team. I appreciate what everyone did. I thought it was just so worthwhile and important that we do that. And then the second thing, Mr. Chairman, is I've just made an observation, and I think it's good news, that we have so much new cooperation going on in between our localities. I was cognizant of the SMART scale and the cooperation with Roanoke City and them submitting that application for us. When we had the bridge memorial dedication yesterday, Salem came out in droves in support, and it was really heartwarming because the whole community was there in recognizing this gentleman. And then on the third level, when we went to the Moyer, several of us went to the Moyer complex ribbon cutting, and there was a lot of Roanoke County people there. It was just really heartwarming to me that we are all in this community together and supportive of the different things that are going on in our communities, and I thought that was good news. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Mahoney.
A couple comments. Board members, 2 weeks ago, I started my campaign about the through cut for Starkey Road and 419. And I also commented about some of the expenditures that the taxpayers, maybe not necessarily Roanoke County taxpayers individually, but Commonwealth of Virginia taxpayers were making with respect to a lot of these road improvements, which are all wonderful. But I commented about what we were spending for bike lanes and pedestrian access, particularly in the 419 corridor. I think that corridor, to me, is somewhat dangerous. So I don't know if I would ever ride a bike in front of Tanglewood Mall on my bicycle. But I guess, as I had a conversation with a citizen, it's sort of, to quote him, it was like a chicken and egg argument. What comes first? And maybe you have to build the infrastructure first before people actually begin to use it. And so we will have pedestrian access across 419 in many places on that corridor. We'll have bicycle access and bicycle lanes there. In my experience from going to my family's beach house in Delaware, the bike lanes there on Coastal Highway, which is a 4-lane divided highway, very similar to 419, the bike lanes there are probably a good 10, 12 feet. You could walk 4 or 5 people abreast. Our bike lanes here are not quite as wide. I would never ride a bike on Brambleton or Chaparral. The only time I ride my bike is on the Greenway. But the one citizen I was talking about wanted to come and speak to the board about the benefits of bikes, and I indicated to him that we do have a 3-minute opportunity for any citizens to speak. But he wanted to encourage all of us to come out with him and ride an e-bike. And I told him that Mr. Radford on our board has an e-bike, so that we're already cutting edge in this area.
Absolutely.
The second comment or question, maybe from staff, is what is our total expense for school resource officers? I saw in our budget amendment, we have an appropriation to the sheriff to cover, I guess, a deficit for SROs. And then also in our consent agenda, this is the second reading we had for those two Department of Criminal Justice Services grants to our police department that are $300 and some thousand each. That almost gets to $1 million. And I think don't get me wrong, it's very important. We have to protect our children. Having SROs in our schools is, I think, a key element of public safety, and we do public safety, and that's a #1 priority for us. But just more of a, not immediately, but sort of what the total cost is, because I'd like to publicize that and let our citizens know that we're meeting the safety needs of our children. And there is a cost to that, and we're willing to pay that. That's our #1 priority. So if you could just kind of, what that total amount is, because I understand we're filling the gap for the sheriff, but I'm sure there's a piece already in the sheriff's budget that is also addressing that. So that total could be, I don't know, significantly higher than the calculation that I did off today's agenda.
We'd be happy to detail that out for the board, and there is some overlap with the grant and the sheriff because we're filling folks on the PD side. But we'll have Rebecca and Lori send you a detailed breakout.
No hurry.
Both why it's funded the way it is and what the totals are.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Radford.
Yeah, one comment, I just want to talk about the regional cooperation, and Megan Cronice just highlighted all the smart scale success that we've had. And, when Mr. North and I go to the TPO and we sit at the table, when you look at Roanoke County geographical, I don't have to remind everybody of this, but we're the donut, and in the whole is City of Salem, City of Roanoke, and Town of Vinton. And the four of us have got to work together and cooperate and agree on those projects. And so that's, a real success to our staff, to Megan and her staff for bringing all those together and making those localities understand what we do in the county benefits you, and you. So it's a great example of realization that we're doing at that level. And Mr. North leads that TPO as the chairman. So we're sitting in a good position for having a good network and good communication with Dr. Smoot. When he comes in, he really listens to us and to a lot of suggestions Mr. North has. So, I just see us being a pivotal point in the transportation hub, because we're their outer ring. They got to go through us to get where they're going, and make it convenient and make it flow and safety. So that's just my comment on transportation. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Let me just intercede before Ms. Shepherd. Amy?
I don't have anything for today, but thank you.
Okay, thank you, Tammy. Megan's presentation, we want to put that in that little file you and I are working on. I know you'll take care of that. Thank you. Okay, Tammy, thank you very much. I really have nothing to report, but I do have a couple announcements that I want to share with the public. Tavern Stage Summer Music Series at Explorer Park, Friday, 5:30. That's this week. It's a free concert. In these inflationary times, it's nice to go somewhere where it's free. Just take a couple chairs in case there's not a table that you want to sit at. Leave them in your car if you don't need to set them up. Brew Pub opens up at 5:30 to 10. They've got food, and cold beverages, and get your neighbors and go out and have some fun. I was told that we may not go Friday night because we got some other plans Saturday, but I've been known to change people's minds when I want to go out to Explorer Park and listen to some music. Eco Fest
Have
is
you talked to
also-
Bonnie about that?
Yes. Bonnie, yes, Echo Fest at Explorer Park this Saturday, July 13th. There's a whole bunch of stuff going on. I would tell you this, to look at www.roanokecountyparks.com or call 540-427-1800, because there are many, many things going on, and I'm sure there's one or two of them that you might be interested in. That's Echo Fest at Explorer Park on Saturday, July 13th. At this time, we will be moving to the third floor for work sessions. The first work session with staff to discuss potential changes to Roanoke County regulation of residential lot drainage. Doug Blunt and Rachel Lauer will be there along with Tarek to talk about that. Then we're going to hear from our former colleague, now Commissioner of Revenue, a work session on potential changes to the elderly tax relief. Momentarily, the board will recess to the third floor for these work sessions. However, before doing so, I would like to move that the board go into closed session upon the completion of the work sessions. Item K, closed meeting pursuant to the Code of Virginia as follows. I move to go into closed session pursuant to the Code of Virginia, Section 2.2-3711, subparagraph A, Part 8 of the Code of Virginia, to consult with the county attorney regarding a specific matter that requires the provision of legal advice. Specifically, the board will receive information and counsel regarding a lien secured on a particular parcel of real property. Is there a second?
Second.
Will the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Radford?
Yes.
Mrs. Hooker?
Yes.
Mr. Mahoney?
Yes.
Mrs. Shepherd?
Yes.
Mr. North?
Yes. The board will now recess to the third floor for the work sessions. Thank you.
Okay, I give up, tell me. Yeah, I wouldn't have guessed either, but they are two nations with a shared love for a particular drink, yerba mate.
Okay, so if I've got this right, yerba mate is not quite a tea. It's an infusion, and it's made out of herbs and it's traditionally prepared in a gourd and sipped through a metal straw.
Yep, you got it. And players at the Copa America have been spotted exiting their team buses with their mates, which kind of makes sense.